The casinos of Las Vegas, a playground for the rich and famous. And at one time, a cash pipeline straight to America's mafia. The movie Casino portrayed the high-stakes battle fought between the mob and the law for the soul of the city.
They're agents, Frankie. Look at this.
But the true story is even more astonishing.
Tony said, we gotta whack this guy.
And just as violent.
I opened up the door, and that's when I proceeded to kill him.
Now, police and FBI agents, some talking for the first time, reveal the inside story of their war on the mob. The surveillance.
You're trying to plant a bug inside of a room where these guys would meet. It gets very hairy.
The heists.
They broke through the roof, and one of the burglars jumped through the hole and stood on top of the vault.
And the real dangers they faced as they fought the mob.
And my message was, if you kill my cops, I will come and kill everything that moves, walks, or crawls around your house. And then I'll burn your house down.
This is the incredible real story of Casino, the battle for Vegas.
We had to come in here and replant the American flag.
The movie Casino, directed by Martin Scorsese and released in 1995, would become a Hollywood classic. Starring Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci, the story it told of the epic standoff between the mafia and the law may have seemed far-fetched to moviegoers. In fact, it was a largely accurate depiction of what happened in Las Vegas in the 70s. Then, the city was booming, but beneath the glitz and the glamour lay a dark reality.
The top guy in the casino in that era always was directly tied into the mob somewhere.
Nevada had been the first state to legalize gambling. In the 1930s, the 5,000 Vegas residents awoke to find a new kind of businessman in town.
These guys had run illegal gambling all over the country. They knew what worked.
The mafia had arrived in Vegas. Here, mobsters like Bugsy Siegel seized the opportunity to expand their criminal empire to new heights. And they did so with the town's blessing.
People here were more than happy to look the other way. There was no other industry. You know, desert and dirt, and that was about all that was here.
Over the next 4 decades, 5 mafia families secretly took control of nearly all of the big casinos. By the 1970s, Vegas had become one of the mob's biggest sources of cash, fueling extortion, racketeering, and prostitution all over America.
It was big, big money. I mean, big, big money. This is easy money. You're getting a piece of all the slot machines, you're getting a piece of all the crap tables, the 21 tables, you're getting a chunk of that action over there.
The mafia had installed seemingly legitimate corporations to run their casinos. And the most lucrative of them all was the Stardust. In the movie, Robert De Niro played a character based on real-life gambling genius Frank "Lefty" Rosenthal. Rosenthal was officially the Stardust's entertainment director and rubbed shoulders with stars like Frank Sinatra, but in reality, he actually ran the casino for the Chicago mob. His mafia bosses were illegally siphoning off over $1 million every month from the Stardust and 2 other casinos.
By law today, a casino cage does not have a back door. In that era, you're darn right they had a back door. That's where the little black bag went.
If it could be proved that the real owners of the Stardust were the Chicago Mafia, then the authorities would shut the casino down. So the mob came up with a way of pocketing their cash without leaving any trace in the accounts. It was known as the skim.
I always knew that we drew a skim out of Vegas, always knew it. But that's something we never talked about, because once you start talking about it, you would lose that skim. There would be too many problems.
But the success of the skim gave the mob a dilemma. While millions disappeared out the back door of its casinos, some employees started some skimming of their own.
Consider you're a casino dealer making, I don't know, $100 a day, whatever you made in that era, and you're handling tens of thousands of dollars in cash. There's a real temptation to stick some of that in your pocket.
The Mafia needed a man on the ground prepared to use violence against anyone muscling in on their action. In 1971, the Chicago mob sent in Tony the Ant Spilatro to act as their enforcer. Lifelong mobster Spilatro would become the inspiration for Joe Pesci's character in Casino.
Tony was a very, very tough guy. And if you gotten on the wrong side of him, you may possibly get your head broke, your legs broke, get killed. Them are about the biggest things that could happen to you, that would happen to you.
The mob told Spilatro to protect the skim without attracting the attention of the law. He adopted the guise of a small businessman, but keeping a low profile was not part of his game plan.
Tony really had this desire to be a big guy in the outfit. He told me that he wanted to be a boss in the syndicate.
Spilatro wanted his own criminal empire in Vegas. One of his money-making schemes was a robbery gang to target hotels and private houses. He called on his old friend from Chicago, Frank Collada, to help crew it up.
I said, Tony, it's supposed to be a no-no to rob out here. He said, don't worry, I'm the boss, there's no problems. He said they could do anything they want in this town as long as they don't rob the wrong people.
In the hotels in the wealthy suburbs of Vegas, Collada and his crew found rich pickings.
I mean, I made a lot of money in Vegas, a lot of money. And Tony got a portion of the big score.
As the city's first organized burglary crew, the gang made full use of lax security.
I mean, it was not a big deal to go in a house and find 15 to 30,000 in a drawer. I was just laying there.
As depicted in the movie Casino, the crew would often smash through walls to carry out their robberies, earning them the nickname the Hole-in-the-Wall Gang. Spilatro had masterminded his very own crime spree, including burglary, extortion, and arson. And it didn't stop there. The mob's enforcer soon became a prime suspect in a number of murders of rival gangsters and criminals. In fact, in his first 3 years in Vegas, there were more gangland killings than in the previous 25 years combined.
I don't believe he's killed as many people as they said, but he's killed quite a bit,
Spilatro had broken mafia orders to keep a low profile in the city. Now he was about to bring the whole weight of the law crashing down not just on his own activities, but on the mob's entire Vegas operation. By 1979, just as the movie Casino depicted, money secretly skimmed from Vegas casinos had become one of the mafia's biggest sources of cash. And their enforcer, Tony Spilatro, was attracting the attention of the authorities with his violent crime spree. Everyone knew that the mob ran Vegas, but proving it would be a huge challenge.
It's a cash business. That's something you have to kind of consider. about casinos in general, and particularly in that era, all cash. There's no record. How much money did you make today? Pick a number.
To end the mob's reign, the police and the FBI would have to prove the existence of the skim, the way the mob siphoned off millions of dollars a month while leaving no trace in the casino's official accounts.
Nobody was tracking it because it didn't exist for all intents and purposes. And those mob guys, much like business people today, the game becomes, how much money can I make?
In 1979, as part of a major government initiative, FBI agents were dispatched to the city to drive the mafia out of Vegas. Lynn Farron would spearhead efforts to find evidence of the skim.
Everybody was just invigorated by the chance to really do something that would have national impact.
Emmett Michaels would supervise the Bureau's surveillance efforts.
We had to come in here and replant the American flag.
And Dennis Arnoldy was assigned to bring Tony Spilatro and his criminal gang to justice.
We were going to keep the pressure on these guys at all time. We had the manpower and the resources, and so we used them.
But bringing down the mob in Vegas was never going to be easy. Corruption in the judicial system was rife, and the mafia was swift and brutal when it came to silencing rivals or potential witnesses.
Their purpose was to make money for themselves, and it didn't matter what they had to do, they did it. If it involved the killing, they did it.
Faced with this challenge, the FBI launched one of the largest surveillance operations ever undertaken on the mob. Suspects were monitored and photographed.
We did it the hard way. Now we can do everything with computers and satellites. We don't have to do all that physical, eyes-on kind of work.
Agents also secretly installed bugs and wiretaps in casinos and known mafia hangouts throughout Vegas.
You're trying to be secretive, go in as maintenance man, and plant a bug inside of a room where these guys would meet. It gets very hairy.
Receiving the lion's share of the FBI's attention was Tony Spilatro and his suspected associates in the hole-in-the-wall gang. The surveillance produced thousands of hours of tape, allowing agents to piece together a picture of Spilatro's criminal empire. FBI agents also worked hard to find informants within his organization. In this actual recording, Spilatro is overheard discussing a suspected mole.
Yeah. Guy's name is Sai. Well, there ain't nothing to it. I mean, I know the guy's a rat, and I told him that. Oh, okay. Well, if he shows up with him, it'll be a surprise to me. I'm telling you, he won't, because he knows how I feel about him.
Spilatro soon began to feel the pressure of the FBI's surveillance.
Well, it got to him. I don't know if it drove him mad, but it got to him. It's going to get to you, you know, to know that you're always being watched.
Paranoid about surveillance and about potential informants, Spilatro took ever more drastic action to keep the authorities at bay. In October 1979, he received a tip-off that fellow gangster Jerry Lisner was talking to the feds.
Tony said, we got to whack this guy. So then I put it together, and I went over to Lisner's house that same night, and I opened up the door, and that's when I proceeded to kill him, shoot him in the head.
The following morning, Jerry Lisner was found floating in his Vegas swimming pool. Tony Spilatro had managed to silence one government witness, but the execution would have lasting repercussions.
To murder a government witness is a very, very serious federal violation. And that allowed the FBI to really get into the matter.
Spilatro had raised the stakes in the battle to control Vegas and made himself the FBI's #1 target. And it soon became clear to his right-hand man, Frank Collada, that many of their crimes hadn't been sanctioned by the bosses in Chicago.
One of my particular trips back to Chicago, I had to see the boss. And he says, "Who's killing everybody out there?" He says, "I don't know." And then I thought to myself, isn't Tony getting an okay from Chicago to do half of this stuff?
Tony Spilatro wasn't the only target in the FBI's sights. To oust the mafia from Vegas forever, they had to sever its lifeline, the skim. The Fed's strategy was to follow the money, physically track cash skimmed from the casinos all the way to the mob in Chicago. In mid-1980, agents received their first break.
We were fortunate enough to develop a confidential informant inside of this criminal organization, inside the mob at Las Vegas.
The informant worked at the Stardust, a casino known to be illegally owned by the Chicago mob.
We had information that there was money being moved from the Stardust on a monthly basis back to Chicago.
The information led agents to a Stardust employee named Phil Ponto, who made an ideal courier.
Ponto was living a very Spartan life. He didn't show money. He didn't have a big house. He lived a very low, quiet life. The perfect kind of player for the skimming efforts.
After heavy surveillance on Ponto, agents see the suspect leaving his house carrying a brown paper bag.
Sunday morning, he comes down with the package. He puts it in his car, gets in his car.
And then he drove slowly around the neighborhood with the brown paper bag for a couple of hours until he was certain that no one was following him.
From Ponto's maneuvers, he appears to be an old hand at evading surveillance.
He always used to do U-turns. He would be going down the street like this and then all of a sudden flip around and just go back the other direction. And, you know, we're all cursed because we're all positioning to try to get on him. He was always changing it up.
For 2 hours, Ponto ducks and dives. Then, apparently satisfied that no one is tailing him, he finally pulls into the parking lot of a hardware store where he hands the brown paper bag to another man.
The individual takes the package, puts it in his car, and we follow him and take him to the airport.
Before leaving his vehicle, the man is seen taking big wads of cash from the bag and stuffing it into his suit pockets. And just as the FBI suspected he would, the man later boards a plane bound for Chicago.
And agents there recognized him as an individual named Joseph Tallarico.
Tallarico had strong ties to the Chicago mob. For the FBI, it was the final link in a chain that carried the Stardust Casino's millions all the way to its secret mafia owners. But arresting the couriers wouldn't give the feds enough evidence to nail the mob. The FBI still faced a major hurdle: to prove that the cash in the brown paper bag originated from the gaming tables of the Stardust. Meanwhile, the pressure on Tony Spilatro was increasing. The Vegas Police Intelligence Bureau had a new commander, Kent Clifford, a Vietnam veteran determined to drive the mafia out of his town.
I wasn't afraid of them. I'd been in war. I'd been shot at every day for a year. So I was not afraid of Tony Spilatro.
Under Clifford's command, the police would take a far more confrontational approach. Officer Dave Groover was assigned to keep up the pressure on Spilatro.
It wasn't our goal to be a friend with him. It was our goal to let him know that we were there, let him know we were watching, put the heat on him in any way we could, and to keep him as upset, because as long as we kept him off balance, we knew that he'd make a mistake.
The constant harassment was a deliberate tactic designed to distract the mobster's attention from the FBI's covert surveillance activity.
We took the heat off the surveillance because they was always worried about us in their face. So the FBI could do the covert stuff, and the FBI could get the wiretaps.
What I want to do is I'm going to just get on a plane and go up there and talk to the clown myself.
But these cat and mouse games with the mob were about to turn sour. One evening, Dave Groover followed a vehicle driven by an unidentified man who had just met with Spilatro. Speeding through the Las Vegas traffic, Groover decided to pull the vehicle over so that he could make an arrest. The man pulled a gun, and Groover fired shots, killing the driver. The victim was the son of a local businessman with strong ties to the mob.
He called Tony and wanted the cops killed.
It was no idle threat. Through informants and wiretaps, FBI agents informed the police that a hitman had been dispatched from Chicago to kill Dave Groover and his partner.
We did verify that the hitman was in Las Vegas. I watched him through a set of binoculars. We verified where he stayed. We verified that he did have a gun on him at the time.
With a hitman waiting for the final order to kill two of Clifford's men, decisive action was needed.
Finally, I said to myself, this can't go on. Somebody else is going to get killed. So I talked to the sheriff, said, I want to go to Chicago.
Clifford had decided to confront the heads of the Chicago mob, some of America's most powerful criminals, to demand they lift the contract on his men. Top of his list was Joseph Ayupa, the current head of the outfit. But perhaps tipped off about his visit, none of the bosses were at home when he called. Undeterred, Clifford issued his warning to their attorney instead.
And my message was, if they kill my cops, I will come back and kill everything that moves, walks, or crawls around their house. Then I'm going to burn their house down.
With the message delivered, Clifford returned to his Chicago hotel room to wait for the response from the mob's attorney.
He said, we're meeting tonight with your message. You're not invited to attend. If there's no contract, you'll get a message that says, have a safe journey home, Commander.
Clifford was left to wait. The lives of two of his best men lay in the balance.
About 2 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call. The voice on the other end of the line said, have a safe journey home, Commander, and hung up.
The mob ordered Spilatro to lift the contract on Clifford's officers. They had sent him to Vegas to protect the skim from rival criminals, not to pick a damaging fight with the law. Spilatro was unrepentant. In fact, he was planning the biggest robbery Vegas had ever seen. By 1981, just as the movie Casino portrayed, the Chicago mob's enforcer was under constant surveillance from the law. Both the FBI and the police had been monitoring his hole-in-the-wall gang, a robbery outfit that had been terrorizing the city for over 2 years. Now, agents had managed to get one of the gang to talk. He gave them detailed information of a planned heist at Bertha's, a Vegas store specializing in high-quality silverware and jewelry.
They was going to use the 4th of July, when all the fireworks were going off on the strip, they could be pounding a hole through the roof.
The robbery was the brainchild of Frank Collada. If successful, it would be the biggest of its kind in Vegas history.
Been $1 million. We'd have probably wound up with, I'd say, close to probably 75 to 100,000 apiece.
A large percentage of the haul would go to Tony Spilatro. For the FBI and the police, the heist offered a golden opportunity.
It was the one link where we could put all these guys together into one major criminal activity that we could link back to Mr. Spilatro. So when that information came, of course, we are going to react, and we're going to react 100%.
To catch the gang in the act, the FBI plans a massive surveillance operation. In a coordinated effort, over 40 FBI agents and police officers move in to cover the raid. With so much at stake, nothing was left to chance.
The surveillance guys were out there at least 24 hours in advance. They had the place covered.
With soaring temperatures outside, agents in surveillance vans around Bertha's had to sit tight and wait for the gang to make their move.
It was at least, up in the 110s, I would say. That sun was beaten down, and the heat in the vehicle was so great. I can't imagine what it was inside, but they basically had to strip down to their undershorts, and they were feeling faint and getting ready to pass out.
The hole-in-the-wall gang were also out on the streets that day, ensuring that Bertha's wasn't being watched.
We checked around us all the time, constantly checked the surveillance to see if there was anything on us.
Any mistakes by the FBI or the police would have blown the entire operation.
If I would have seen any policeman I know near me that day, the robbery would have been called off.
Everybody was kind of really tense. This would be the event that eventually we knew would break the group, would send most of them to prison, and it would send shockwaves everywhere.
With the law well hidden, Collada believed the coast was clear. The burglary was on.
I remember the excitement. It was the perfect score. That it went down just perfect.
As the 4th of July fireworks lit up the sky over Vegas, the hole-in-the-wall gang made their move.
We watched them come to Bertha's. We watched them get on the ladder and go up to the top of the roof and drag all their equipment up there.
As the gang prepared to break through the roof, the FBI and police watched and gathered evidence.
We had it all documented, we had it on videotape, and we watched them do it.
For the arrest to be successful, the FBI needed one member of the gang to actually enter the building.
We were there, I don't know how long, an hour, maybe more. And then when they broke through the roof, and one of the burglars jumped through the hole and stood on top of the vault. The crime was completed, and that's when we moved in for our arrest.
The FBI agents and police had caught the gang red-handed.
Well, to me, it was like, okay, we're busted. You can't beat that many people, my friend. You just can't beat them.
Frank Collada, Spilatro's right-hand man, now faced years in jail for organizing the attempted heist. The FBI offered to drop the charges if Collada became a state witness against his boss. And they had some news to make him take the proposition seriously.
We received information that a hit had been placed on Frank's life. And he was informed of that, and that was the final straw.
Collada realized that he had become a liability to Spilatro.
I knew right then and there that Tony wasn't on my side. He was out for Tony, and he was throwing me to the wolves.
Collada was ready to talk, and he began with his most serious crime.
He admitted that he did murder Lisner. He was able to tell us that he was given the order to murder Lisner by Tony Spilatro.
The Chicago mob's enforcer had been sent to Vegas to protect their interests. Now the FBI's net was closing, not only on Spilatro's own criminal activities, but on the Mafia's financial lifeblood, the skim. The Fed's year-long surveillance operation had discovered that a Stardust employee delivered a brown paper bag of cash to mobster Joseph Tallarico on the first Sunday of every month. The FBI had even witnessed Tallarico meeting with Joseph Ayupa, the Chicago mob's supreme boss.
He was the main man. He was the man.
Ayupa and his fellow Chicago mob bosses represented the ultimate prize for the FBI. But to prove they were illegally siphoning cash from the Stardust, agents still had to confirm that the cash in the brown paper bag was money that had been gambled on the casino's floor.
We had to show a direct nexus from the casino gambling receipts to the mob in Chicago.
The FBI came up with an audacious and risky scheme. Agent Emmett Michaels was sent undercover into the Stardust Casino to assume the role of a wealthy gambler.
No, it was a great job. They had no idea I was an agent, but rather a high roller, and they'd want to comp me to a room. They want to do this, do that.
The serial numbers of Michael's dollars had all been recorded, and his unorthodox assignment was to lose thousands of taxpayer dollars. It was a big gamble, in more ways than one. The FBI were betting that out of the millions of dollars gambled in the Stardust every week, some of the marked dollars would find their way into the Mafia's skim. And Michaels found it a tougher assignment than he'd anticipated.
My purpose was to get these bills into the drop box. But it seems every time I went to gamble and use government money, I would end up winning. And so if I was playing blackjack and I had 19 shown and the dealer had 12, I'd ask for a hit just so I'd have to lose, and they'd look at me like I was crazy.
This process went on for months until the FBI were certain that enough marked money had made its way into the Stardust's cash flow. The trap was set. On January 3rd, 1982, the FBI was ready to strike.
We had decided that on this Sunday we would arrest Ponto and Tallarico when they met and passed the package. This day, instead of carrying the brown paper sack that he'd always carried, he was carrying a cardboard box.
A single marked note in the box would prove that the cash came from the Stardust and give the feds their first clear evidence against the mob.
When he finally met up with Tallarico, we were there to greet all of them.
Agents swooped on the two suspects. Neither man attempted to make a getaway. It was a big moment, the culmination of 18 months of surveillance. But the agents were in for a surprise.
We found in the box not the $300,000 in black cash skim, but rather cookies and wine.
I was sick in the stomach because, I mean, you're talking working 12 hours a day shifts, 7 days a week, no time off, no holidays off.
The mob still had a lot of friends in Vegas. It seemed someone had tipped them off.
I remember Ponto and Tallarico laughing and yucking it up, thinking, ha ha, well, we've really beat them. Our case was blown. We had nothing after all those months of work. It was a bad day for the FBI.
The investigation had failed to catch the mob red-handed with money skimmed from the Stardust Casino. But FBI agents weren't about to give up.
I just resolved that day that we would start a new investigation, an overt investigation, and let it lead wherever it might lead. So we had subpoenas issued for records from the Stardust.
Now the FBI took its hunt for evidence of the skim inside the casino. The Stardust was fronted by a legitimate corporation which produced regular audited accounts. Yet the mob was able to siphon off millions of dollars a month without any apparent irregularities in the books. If the feds could crack their fraudulent system, it would sound the death knell for the mob in Vegas. They had a hunch that a crucial piece of casino paperwork called a fill slip could prove to be the skim's Achilles heel.
When a dealer has lost significant number of chips to gamblers, they don't have enough on their table. They'll call for a fill.
A fill slip authorizes a fresh supply of gaming chips to a dealer who has lost money to gamblers. Each fill slip is like a check worth thousands of dollars.
Whatever is written on that fill slip is the amount that's taken out of the cage and gone to the table.
Agents realized that by creating fake fill slips, the mob could make it look like the casino was losing money. This could be the key to the skim. The phantom cash could be siphoned off while the books appeared to balance. Gaming rules required every fill slip to be signed by 4 separate employees, but the FBI suspected the mob simply forged the signatures. Agents seized thousands of the slips for analysis. It was a huge task.
Wow, that's, I don't know, there were 20,000, and we had to look at each one individually.
The agents pulled out hundreds of suspect slips, and along with sample signatures from more than 180 Stardust employees, sent them to the Bureau's handwriting experts in Washington. Now all they could do was wait and hope. By 1982, the FBI team had spent 3 years trying to expose the Mafia's involvement in Las Vegas casinos. Now the Bureau was betting everything on one last throw of the dice. If FBI handwriting experts could prove that signatures on fill slips from the Stardust were forged, it would be cast iron evidence of the skim. It took months of painstaking work, but finally the experts had the evidence. They discovered that hundreds of fill slips were fakes, and that millions in phantom losses could be traced to one man.
The handwriting experts told us after their examination that the fill slips had been forged by the casino manager, Lou Salerno.
The FBI had cracked the case. The fill slip forgery had allowed millions of dollars to disappear without trace. Along with evidence gathered from their surveillance operation, the feds could finally prove that the Stardust was operating a skim.
We were able to show once and for all that organized crime had control of the gaming houses here in Las Vegas. I think people knew that. They would not admit to it.
7 individuals and 3 corporations, charging them with various counts of filing of false tax returns, the interstate transportation of stolen property, embezzling and converting the
For decades,
assets
the
of
Vegas
a
casinos had been one of the mafia's biggest sources of cash. By the 70s, the scale of the skim had triggered the FBI's investigation and ultimately proved the mob's undoing.
This was a jewel in their crown, but, you know, they got greedy. They want more and more and more and more. They're never satisfied. And as a result of that, greed brings them down.
Time had run out for the mob. The Nevada Gaming Board revoked the licenses of Vegas's mafia-backed corporations and forced them to sell all their casinos. The mob had lost its biggest earner, and someone had to pay. Frank Rosenthal, the man who secretly ran the Stardust, narrowly escaped death as his car exploded outside a Vegas restaurant. Rosenthal, the character played by Robert De Niro in the movie Casino, immediately left town. Now there was only one man left, the Chicago mob's own enforcer, Tony Spilatro. The FBI hoped he would turn informer on his bosses.
He was too arrogant and too tough to turn. He would have never turned. He would have bit the bullet.
In June 1986, Spilatro was preparing to stand trial for the murder of Jerry Lisner on the testimony of his old buddy, Frank Collada. But Chicago's mob bosses had other ideas. They feared he would talk and blamed his crime spree for bringing the feds down on their heads.
A few days before he was to appear, we got some information, our Chicago office of the FBI, that no one knew where Tony Spilatro was.
Eight days later, the bodies of Tony Spilatro and his brother Michael were discovered buried in a field in Indiana, 2,000 miles from Vegas. They had been beaten to death in what was portrayed in the movie Casino as a mafia hit. In 2007, a Chicago mobster confessed to carrying out the murder. The law had lost the chance to put Spilatro behind bars, but few mourned his grisly end.
I cheered. I thought that was a great event, because he died just like he lived. He was not good for society. He was bad for society. He never did one good thing in his lifetime. So should I be unhappy? No. I thought it was good that he died and went to hell.
Frank Collada entered the Witness Protection Program. He doesn't regret the day he left his criminal life behind.
I got a chance to do it over again. I'd done it over again in a better way. As far as going back to the way I was, that's the way it was. That's the way I was raised. I knew no better. I knew no better, nor did Tony.
Tony Spilatro's death marked the end of the FBI's investigation in Las Vegas. The government dealt the mafia a massive blow that savaged their income and damaged their organization nationally. In 1986, evidence from the FBI's investigation helped convict a number of high-ranking mob bosses from cities across America. Chicago's Joseph Aiuppa was sentenced to 28 years in jail. the battle for Las Vegas was over, and the law had won.
I believe our investigation was what broke the back of organized crime as far as their owning and operating casinos. And we really, I think, changed the entire face of Las Vegas for the better.
It was the end of an era in Las Vegas. Over the following decades, new, legitimate corporations took over the Strip, transforming the city's skyline. The mob had left a thriving city behind them, but their defeat in Vegas meant they would never be as powerful again.